Good morning and welcome to our second info session on the 5G communications technology. My name is Ralph. I'm working at Lux Innovation and charge of different digital topics, and I will do a quick intro to this session. So before I introduce our speakers, some words on InWink, which is the platform we're using, and on the process. So in the upper right corner, you see some buttons for questions and a chat window. Please don't hesitate to use the questions tab to post any questions you have. We will go through that after the presentation, so you can put them in there anytime and just so to make sure they're not forgotten. This session will be recorded, and the recording will be available later on together with the slides at the usual platform, which is www.research-industry-collaboration.lu. This is also the platform where you need to place your project outline. The deadline for that one is the 9th of February 24, so you still have some time. We will have one more session on the 30th of January on the completeness check. And well, that having said, let me introduce you to my fellow speakers over here. With me are Sophie Klecker from the Ministry of Economy, Mark Lewis from the SNC, Sakival Sundaram from FNR, my colleague Eric Lauer from Lux Innovation from the RDI department, who will all present. And well, next to me is my personal houseplant, who will also attend. That having said, Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ralph, for the introduction, and good morning to everyone, and also welcome from my side to this first Q&A session for the joint 5G call. Just as a short reminder, you can see here the organizers of the 5G joint call, namely the Department of Media, Connectivity and Digital Policy Service, the Ministry of the Economy, the National Research Fund, FNR, and Lux Innovation. So now this slide gives you an overview of the main eligibility criteria that the interested companies would need to fulfill within the joint call 5G. So the dotted box shows you the usual eligibility criteria for the standard R&D aid schemes from the Ministry of the Economy, which some of you might already know from previous aid applications. So here in a nutshell, we have the company's co-funding capacity, the economic impact of the project, the innovation itself, meaning that there should be a new or improved product, process, or service which offers the company a competitive advantage on the market and for which the company needs to overcome some technical challenges during the projects. And finally, there are also some additional generic criteria, which I will show you on the following slides. In addition, there are also three call-specific criteria. So first, it is mandatory for the company to have a collaboration with at least one eligible public research organization. Second, the project can consist of industrial research and or experimental development, meaning that the goal should be to create a sustainable knowledge gain within the company and or to help them develop new or improved products or services. Finally, the project also needs to align with the call topics or call topic. But as promised, I will give you more details on the following slides. So on this slide, we see for the economic impact. This is one important criterion of the project. Here, the company needs to demonstrate its economic substance and the positive impact of the expected project outcome on the future of the company. Therefore, the applicant company would need to demonstrate within the aid application that it already has an economic substance in Luxembourg or a plan to create such substance during the course of the project. In addition, the company must also derive an economic benefit from the project and should illustrate the expected exploitation of the project results. So on this slide, we have one of the generic criteria, the incentive effect. The company must meet some of these generic criteria, and this is the incentive effect, which means that the state aid must have a positive effect on the realization of your project. To respect this criterion, the consortium needs to await the final funding decision by the respective granting authorities before they can start the project. So this will probably be in October of next year. This also means that the company cannot engage into any contracts or legally binding agreements regarding the specific project scope before having received the final funding decision. And of course, there cannot be any retroactivity of the already engaged costs. Another generic criterion concerns the SME analysis, which is used to define the size of the applicant company and the group that it might be part of, which is important because the applicable aid intensities will depend, amongst others, on the size of the company. On this slide, you can also see the respective thresholds, which are calculated based on the number of employees, the annual turnover, and the total balance sheet. And here I would like to mention that we do not only need to consider the applicant company itself, but also all the linked and partner companies. But I will go into more details regarding this on the next slides. So in general, there are three different categories of companies that would need to be considered for the SME analysis. First of all, a company would be considered as autonomous if it is either completely independent without any other participation, or if it has one or more minority partnerships with other companies, each being less than 25%. Your partner companies would be those where the shareholding rise to at least 25%, but no more than 50%. And finally, your link companies would be those where the holdings exceed the 50% threshold. But here it is very important to note that such links between companies cannot only arise through shareholdings, but also through the direct or indirect control of the majority of voting rights or through the ability to exercise a dominant influence, which could also be the case through physical persons. Therefore, it is important that you prepare a detailed organizational chart that reflects all the partner and link companies up to the ultimate beneficial owners of the group. Here you also have an example of such a chart where you can see the level of detail that will be required within the application. To assess the size of the group, you will need to consider 100% of the full-time employees, turnover and total balance sheet of the applicant company, plus 100% for the link companies and a pro rata for the partner companies. But Lux Innovation is, of course, also there to support you if you have any questions on your specific group structure. As briefly explained during the info session a few weeks ago, companies that are considered in difficulty are in general not eligible to state aids, unless they can clearly document that they are already in the process of resolving the issue, for example, through a recapitalization. In general, an undertaking is considered to be in difficulty if it has lost more than half of its share capital, including the share premium, through accumulated losses. However, this criterion does not apply to SMEs that are younger than 3 years. For large companies, we also need to check two additional financial ratios based on their last two annual accounts. So in order to be eligible, the book to debt equity ratio needs to be smaller than 7.5, and the EBITDA to interest coverage ratio needs to be greater than 1. These need only to be considered when the group is considered large, and for small to medium enterprises, we only need to look if they have lost more than half of their share capital due to losses and accumulated losses. Very important to say as well that this criterion needs to be assessed both at the level of the applicant company and the group level, also known as the single economic unit. These are all the companies which are linked to the applicant company. Therefore, you would need to submit the annual accounts of the applicant company for 2021 and 2022 and the consolidated accounts of the group for the same period. If the group has no consolidated accounts, this can also be done through a simplified aggregation of the applicant and all the linked companies, where, of course, again, Lux Innovation can assist you. So on the following slides, we have two examples of an undertaking in difficulty that has lost more than 50% of its subscribed share capital and share premium due to accumulated losses. While this is a rather extreme case with negative own funds, a company can also just slightly be in difficulty. Here we have another example. For instance, although this company has a positive own funds of 5.7 million, it would nevertheless be in difficulty because it has lost more than 50% of its subscribed share capital over the last years. In this case, the company would need to demonstrate that it is already in the process of resolving the issue, for example, through a recapitalization of the company. I would now also like to focus in more detail on the company's co-funding capacity given its importance for the evaluation process. Here, the applicant company would need to demonstrate its viability and financial soundness regarding its contribution to the project, meaning that the company needs to show that it has sufficient financial resources to cover the part of the project costs that will not be co-funded by the ministry. The co-funding capacity can be made up of equity, loans, or future cash flow. Overall, it will be important to provide a realistic budget estimation during phase one and to clearly document your co-funding capacity through a cash flow forecast and the latest annual accounts. As a reminder from the info session, you can see here an overview of the applicable aid intensities, which will depend on the size of the company, but also on the technological complexity of the project. So, as illustrated, smaller companies can benefit from higher aid intensities. Likewise, for industrial research projects that focus on the acquisition of new knowledge without any direct commercial application, the aid intensities will be higher than for projects targeting experimental development, where the goal would be to develop a new or improved solution. Typically, industrial research applies for lower TRL research and experimental development for higher TRL research and development. The exact aid intensities will then be defined based on your specific work packages and the targeted research and development activities. And therefore, it is also possible to have a mix of experimental development and industrial research in your project. So here you can now see the eligible costs for the applicant companies within the joint call 5G. So these would be the staff costs, which consists of the gross salary of your internal employees working on the R&D project, plus a top up for the employer's social charges. Investment and equipment that shall be used and depreciated during the project, the materials and consumables during the RDI project, the external subcontracting for the R&D project, and also additional overhead costs, which should amount to 20 or 25% of your total staff costs. During the first phase of the call, the companies will need to provide a budget estimation within their project outline on the platform, which will then serve to estimate the maximum state aid that the company can request and the necessary co-funding that it needs to provide. While this budget can, of course, be refined in the second phase if the project is retained, it is nevertheless important to provide a realistic estimation. So on the following slides, I will now show you how to document your co-funding capacity by means of a cash flow forecast that is indeed mandatory for all participating companies. So while startups where the applicant company is younger than 3 years need to provide a detailed cash flow forecast, established SMEs or large companies can also provide a simplified version with less details. Both templates can also be downloaded on the platform within the attachment section of your projects. But those are, of course, only templates, and you can also submit the cash flow in another format if it provides the same level of information. Now, what should you consider when preparing the cash flow? Well, you should base your projections on realistic assumptions and clearly document them to demonstrate the financial viability of the company. In addition, the projection should start at least in February 2024, so at the end of phase one, and cover a period until a year after the project. So to conclude on this topic, let me briefly summarize what you need to prepare during your phase one applications. So for large companies and established SMEs, you need to prepare the 2021 and 2022 annual accounts, a simplified cash flow forecast, information of any financing not stemming from own funds should be included within the cash flow, and if applicable, the relevant documentation concerning the resolution of your undertaking in difficulty situation. For startups where the applicant company is younger than 3 years, the required financial attachments are the same, but instead of a simplified cash flow, you will need to submit a detailed version. So on this slide, you can also find the link to a short video tutorial summarizing the main eligibility criteria. And in addition, you can, of course, also find the replay and the presentation slides of today's webinar directly on the Research Industry Collaboration platform. Finally, I would also like to remind you about our next Q&A session, as already mentioned by Ralph in the introduction. So on the 30th of January, this will be shortly before the deadline of the phase one, and it will cover the final completeness check of the application. And please don't hesitate to already start preparing your application together with your partners directly on the platform. So with this said, I would like to thank you all for your attention for this presentation. And then now I would suggest that we move on to the Q&A part of today's webinar.
Do we have any more presentations? Mark, Sophie, Saktivel?
No more.
Okay, so then we just move on directly to the questions. So first question is, can a Big Four company, mainly technology consulting department, participate as a company and apply for the aid? And can it maintain applicant in the consortium, or should it be subcontracted? Maybe Eric, Sophie, something.
So yeah, maybe I can start and then I can let Sophie complete. So I think we went through the main eligibility criteria that a company needs to fulfill. So the co-funding, the economic impact, the innovation criteria, and also the generic criteria. If a company fulfills those criteria, it can also be funded by the Ministry of the Economy. Afterwards, if it should be an applicant or a subcontractor, I think that depends on the role of the company. If it is more of a subcontracting role where you offer services to, let's say, an industrial company in this domain, then you are more considered as a subcontractor. But if you, when in a consortium with a research organization, will develop a new solution or a service or product within the call topics, then of course, if the company fulfills the eligibility criteria, it can benefit from the state aid by the Ministry of the Economy. And I will let Sophie complete if there was something missing in my answer.
I think it was complete. Just keep in mind that the main applicant should be the one who has most of the developments on his side, so it's doing most of the work and also has the biggest budget, and also that it's the beneficiary of the developed product or whatever you plan to do. Subcontractor on the other side, your budget should be rather limited, and you should be only responsible for a smaller part of the whole project. So not involved in the complete project, but only a smaller role. So this really depends on the project you're planning to set up, whether a main applicant role or a subcontractor role is more applicable. I know maybe Mark, if you want to add something.
You're on mute.
I think you're on mute.
I'm still no. No, I'm fully agree with what has been said before, and as from our side, there is not much to add. As Sophie said, the main part should be on research or on the company side, and if you have an subcontractor, which has to fulfill also his role as a subcontractor.
Maybe before going to the next question, just something to chip in over here, because since we're on the topic, as this is a quite technological project, there might be a substantial part going not into, let's say, the efforts and the work and the research, but also into materials. And that might come from the subcontracting party. Let's say, just theoretically speaking, if you have something where somebody says, okay, 50% go into the materials, 50% go into the work, then it should still be the 50% of the research that should be the main contractor or the main applicant. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Good. Then we have a second question over here relating to the slide that says no contract before the final funding decision. If we have an ongoing project in the phase of proof of concept with ESA, does that mean we couldn't apply? Erik, you want to take that one? It's eligibility.
Yes, I can take that one. Thank you for the question. So I think it's important to firstly separate the project. So if your company chooses to apply within this joint call, it needs to be a separate project. And another aspect, of course, is that no costs can be double funded. So if you already have obtained funding for the project from ESA, this could potentially not be double funded through other aids. So I think if you finish the proof of concept and then do another project, so with separate costs, separate objectives, and so forth, then it's just important that for this project you do not engage the project before you have obtained the final funding decision from the Ministry of the Economy in the case of a company.
And we have a question which also relates to the first one. We had a Big Four company, because on my guichet, it says that the main applicant should be in the four following fields. Then experimental development, fundamental research, industrial research, etc. So just for clarification, if you're mainly coming from the technology consulting department, are they still eligible for this call?
So I can maybe also first answer. I think it relates back to what Sophie and I discussed previously. So again, in this within this call, and generally for the R&D aids, we differentiate between experimental and industrial research. So the aids are clearly targeted for companies who engage in R&D activities. Then there is industrial research, which is aided to a higher amount because there is more complexity, there is more risk the company takes. And then we have the experimental development, which is for higher TRL research and development for the actual development of the solution. So I think there again, it depends on what activities and what research the company does. But it's circling back to the answers we provided previously. It should be the company who mainly invests into this research. And in case it is more of a subcontracting role for another company, then it is in terms of a subcontractor and not necessarily as a beneficiary of the state aid within a consortium.
Yeah, maybe As an addition, the main activity of the applicant company research activities, but for this particular project you're applying to, there has to be activities in the domain of either industrial research or experimental development, but it doesn't have to be the main activity throughout the year. So you can have other activities, but for this particular, you have to do research activities. I don't know if, Ralph, you're talking because I can't hear you.
I was saying, do we have any further questions? Because I don't see anything. But I think if there's questions coming up afterwards, they can still be put in the platform.
Exactly. So on the last slide, you can see the questions can be sent to contact@researchindustry collaboration.lu, and the questions related to the research organization, there we have the link where those questions can be asked. And then we, of course, on the platform, you also have an FAQ where you find frequently asked questions and their answers.
Okay, so I think we have some more coming up here. So is there a specific TRL levels that project needs to meet, and is the total budget 1.4 million, or could it be divided into 300 to 1.1 million or something like that? So I think we had a brief discussion about that before we opened the call. So maybe anybody wants to chip in for that one? What's the total budget of the project?
Maybe Sophie could take it for the ministry side and Sakti for the research organization side.
Yes, so for the total budget, there has been defined in the project description a maximum amount of C8, which isn't the maximum amount of the project, but maximum amount of 8, which is per project on the company side. I think Sakti has some information on the other side, and then there's also the division. Maybe you can clarify that one as well.
Sure. So it's at the same for the public research organization as well. So this will be 700K per proposal, but this is a maximum, the maximum limit. It doesn't mean that one has to apply to the maximum limit. If the public research organization needs only 400K, they can also apply 400K. This is generally recommended. And coming to the aid intensity for the public research organization, it's 100%. It means whatever they don't need to bring any money. The public research organization does not need to bring any money to the joint call. So it's a 100% funding support from FNR. Now I also see the other questions. Maybe I can take it and then can be complemented by other speakers here about the TRL levels. For sure, this is not for the fundamental research problems. So this must be anything above TRL 3, not for TRL 1 and TRL 2, or TRL even not for TRL 3. So this should be something you have a proof of concept already in the lab, but you want to do along with the industry. I think if you attended our previous session, we were talking about the valley of death, which is the funding gap between the public and private exploitation, right? So we are talking that particular band of TRLs 4 and above. And then of course in this call we segregate, so which has more TRL. That is what we were talking last couple of questions. The higher TRLs or medium TRLs, but not for sure not the lower TRLs. So TRL 4 and above. maybe Sophie, if you want to add a little bit of discussion on the experimental setup, the applied research, because I see still people, what does this mean?
I think your explanation was already quite clear. So fundamental research is excluded. So both extremes of the TRL levels are excluded, let's say, the fundamental research, but also the very incremental just improvements of already commercialized solutions are also excluded. So it's really to get from research to commercialization, which is tackled in this project. Maybe coming back also to the budgets. As for companies, it's not 100%. You have to take into consideration that the 700,000 is really the amount of the aid and not the amount of the budget. But then again, the budget is defined per company and per research institution, and you shouldn't, like the division which is suggested here, 300, 1,100 is not something which is feasible. So you can't just shift from one partner to the other. Be exactly equal, but no one can have more than 70% of the total budget.
Okay, so I don't see any more questions coming up at this stage.
Okay, maybe Rolf, you were asking, it's 700 plus 700, it is 700 plus 700.
Well,
I think we were.
just wanted to point it out. I mean, so
Yeah.
there are different things. So one thing is, of course, a project can have, as Sophie already said, can be much, much more expensive, but you can get up to a specific amount, and that can be 100%. But of course, the project could be 10 million if you're willing to whip it out. But that does not mean that you're getting any more funding. But then the thing is, how much funding do you get per site maximum for the project?
That's correct. And also maybe the 700K, some people might wonder why this is 700K compared to the other joint call, which is HPC where 400K. I think here they can also bring other public research organizations. Okay, so this is if there is only one public research organization, typically what we have seen in the past, it's around 400 to 500K. That's where if you see the regular bridges is a FNR program, which is for the exactly for the similar needs, bridging the gap between the public and private partnerships. So this one, the maximum limit is 400K. But here you see for 700, because you also can bring other public research organizations. It's a more collaboration. It's what is expected is collaborative projects. But of course, it also depends on the needs of the projects. If a project, even one entity, the project demands 700K, of course, this is also eligible. But of course, if you ask why it's 700K, not 400K, we are providing more opportunities for more collaborations. So that's all from my side, Rolf. If you have no other comments or questions on this particular topic.
No, I don't see any more questions coming up over here. But as we said, it can always be put in the platform as well. So, and then we'll address it next time. Okay, one last round. Anybody else? Any more questions? I don't see that is the case. So we might as well close this round very early today. So thanks a lot for attending. Thanks a lot for speaking and for presenting. And well, hope to see a lot of more people or a lot of more projects than in the new year. And until then, have a nice Christmas. Enjoy the holidays.
Thank you, Rolf. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Happy Christmas. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Bye.